So today we're going to do a couple of review problems from the study guide for chapter 11, sections 1 through 4. So we're going to do number 2 first. And what we need to do in this first section is we're going to simplify the expression, which means we're going to factor. We have to check the denominator that it doesn't equal 0 and simplify. So the first thing I'm doing is factoring. So there's nothing I can factor from the top. And out of the bottom, I can factor that to c plus 5 times c minus 5. I will add parentheses to the top so that now I can cancel my expressions. Before I cancel my expressions, I got to check my denominator. And on one side, c plus 5 cannot equal 0. And on my other side, c minus 5 cannot equal 0. So if I, in this case, subtract 5 on both sides, in this case, add 5 to both sides, I can see that c cannot equal negative 5 or 5. So that takes care of my restrictions in terms of what I'm not allowed to do. So then I'm going to cancel my expression here. So I have c minus 5 on the top, c minus 5 on the bottom, and when there's nothing here, I can add a 1. So it's 1 over c plus 5. And again, c is not allowed to be equal to negative 5 or 5. Okay, we'll put those in brackets. Now in the next one, we're going to do the same process. We're going to factor, check our denominator, simplify. So on the top, there's nothing I can really factor, so I'm going to leave it x plus 7. And on the bottom, I can factor that to be x plus 7 times x plus 1. So those are my two factors of the denominator. So I'm going to check my denominator now, and I'm going to see that x plus 7 cannot equal 0. X plus 1 cannot equal 0. So that means that x cannot equal negative 1 or negative 7. Okay, either one of those answers will make my denominator go to 0, which doesn't work. So now I go back to simplifying my expression here. So I have x plus 7 over x plus 7. That happens once, so it becomes 1 over x plus 1 as long as x is not equal to negative 1 or negative 7. Okay, so that's my final answer there. I'm going to try number 6 now. Number 6 is t minus 4 over 4 minus t. Now they look very similar. So what I'm going to do is leave the top as it is, t minus 4, and I'm going to factor out a negative 1 out of my denominator. Now if I divide by negative 1, I get negative 4, and I get a positive or plus t. And now I'm just going to rewrite that. So it's t minus 4 over negative 1 times, I'm just going to reverse this, t minus 4 again. So now I need to check my denominator. So in my denominator, t minus 4 cannot be equal to 0. So t cannot equal 4. But I still need to simplify this. So I have t minus 4 on the top, t minus 4 on the bottom. I can cancel those, and I have 1 over negative 1, which actually just is negative 1, as long as t is never equal to 4. Okay, so for that first section, we're just going to factor, check our denominator so that it doesn't equal 0, and then simplify. So now let's try section 11.2. And this we're going to multiply and divide, and we're going to also simplify. So let's take a look at number 11. So when I take a look at number 11, what I have here is 4n squared over 7 times 14 over 2n to the third. So I'm just going to start canceling things out. 7 goes into 7 once, 7 goes into 14 twice, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 2 once, okay? And then I have n squared divided by n to the third, and that's just n. And what's left here is there's a 4 in the numerator, okay? And there is 1 times 1 times n in the denominator. So this all simplifies just down to 4 over n. So that's all we're going to do is factor, cancel, and then multiply or divide. My next problem, I'm going to try number 12, 8b squared minus 4b. So I'm going to first factor out a 4b, and I end up with 2b minus 1, and that is over 3b squared. Okay? And then instead of dividing, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. Well, the reciprocal of this would be 9b over 2b minus 1. And again, I'm going to add parentheses here so that I can keep my expressions together so I can cancel. And then what I'll do here is start to cancel. So right away I have 2b minus 1 on the top and the bottom, so I can cancel those. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 9 twice. I have b times b over b squared, so all these b's cancel out. And I'm left with 4 times, sorry, this is a 3. 4 times 3, which is 12, and everything else canceled. So I'm just left with 12. Okay? So now, let's take a look at my next example. I'm going to do number 14. And number 14 has 3y over 4y minus 8 divided by 9y over 2y squared minus 4y. So let's start factoring things here. This I have 3y, and then in the denominator I have 4, and this is y minus 2 in the denominator. And instead of dividing, I'm going to change that to multiplying, and I'm going to use the reciprocal. And the reciprocal of this is 2y squared minus 4y over 9y. But let me factor something out of here. I can factor out a 2y, and this becomes y minus 2. And my denominator I leave is 9y. So the first thing I did is I keep the first rational number, or keep the first fraction, times, and I use the reciprocal. So now I can start to cancel things out. So let's see what I have. I have 3y goes into 3y once, 3y goes into 9y 3 times. I have y minus 2 over y minus 2 there, and I have 2 goes into 2 once and 2 goes into 4 twice. And let's see, what do I have left on the numerator? I have 1 times 1, so that gives me 1. I have 2 times 3, which gives me 6, so that reduces to 1 over 6. Now number 15, we're going to skip from our review. There is a slight typo in the answer case. We're going to skip that one for now. So let's take a look now at section 11.4. So 11.4, we're going to add or subtract. And in 11.4, adding or subtracting, the big thing that we want to do is get a common denominator. Okay, so we need a common denominator. So in number 17, if you see, both of my fractions are over 5, so that already has a common denominator. So I just keep my common denominator, and I can add my numerators. 6t and 4t are 10t. Now I still need to reduce. 10 over 5 is 2, so this becomes just 2t. All right. Number 18, I do not have a common denominator, so my least common denominator is going to be c squared. So what I'm going to have to do is multiply on this side, top and bottom, by c, so that I get c squared in my denominator. So over here I have 6c in the numerator over c squared plus 4 over c squared, and that gives me 6c plus 4 over c squared. Now I can also factor out a 2 in the numerator if I wanted to, so I could say that is 2 times 3c plus 2 over c squared. Either one of these versions would be fine. Okay. Now we're going to try number 23. I have 8 plus x minus 1 over x plus 4. So now my least common denominator is going to be x plus 4. So I'm going to have to multiply the top and the bottom here by x plus 4 over x plus 4. Okay, just so I get my common denominator. And I'm going to add parentheses here to remind me to use the distributive property. So this becomes 8 times x plus 4 over x plus 4 plus x, sorry, that's a minus, x minus 1 over x plus 4. And what I'm going to do here is, now I have a common denominator, I'm just going to multiply out my distributive property here. So I have 8x plus 32, and then in the other fraction I have x minus 1, and that whole thing is over a common denominator of x plus 4. And then I'm going to add up my like terms. 8x plus 8 plus x is 9x. 32 minus 1 is 31, and that is over x plus 4. And there's nothing I can factor out of 9x plus 31 to make that reduce to go any further. Okay? And let's try this problem. This is kind of a tricky problem. Number 25. So number 25 had x squared minus 1. And in the denominator, x squared minus x minus 2, we're going to subtract the fraction x minus 1 over x minus 2. So my numerator here, I'm just going to leave this as x minus 1 squared, x squared minus 1 for right now. Let's factor the denominator. And this becomes x minus 2 times x plus 1. And I'm going to subtract x minus 1 on the top and x minus 2 on the bottom. So I need to first look at my common denominator. So my common denominator, if you notice, they both have an x minus 2, but they both need an x plus 1. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by x plus 1. So now my denominator is the same, okay? And my numerator, I have x squared minus 1 minus, if I take a look at this, I have x minus 1 times x plus 1. These are conjugates, so I'm going to multiply and get x squared minus 1. And that whole thing is over the denominator x minus 2 times x plus 1. Now, let's take a look at my numerator. X squared minus 1 minus x squared minus 1. So that ends up being x squared minus 1 minus x squared. Negative times a negative is a positive 1. And I keep my denominator, x minus 2 times x plus 1. And so now take a look at my numerator. I have x squared minus x squared, 1 minus 1. So everything cancels out here to give me 0 over this common denominator. But that doesn't really matter anymore because 0 over anything is going to be 0. So that's my final answer. Okay, so these are just a couple of the key review problems for these 3 sections. Please complete the entire study guide and check your answers online. Thanks.